Apparently, I was just testing the sound because it looks like it was kind of freezing on me. Just looking at the live itself. Refreshing. I'm going to take a look and see as well with this live. Just taking a look. See if the sound's there. Okay. We're just going to start here. So we're going to say the Lord's Prayer. So 5-minute mark. Our Father in heaven, honored be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Each day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us on a righteous path and guard us from evil. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen, family. I just wanted to make sure this was smooth because what I want to do is talk about today is something I've been waiting for a long time. And it was a map study of the Scythian people. If you don't know, this is really important to understand when understanding. It's actually single-handedly the study of the Scythians. It links a broken link of the Philistines to the Turkish people to everything that you see right here. So it's a very interesting study. I'm very excited when I seen it. And I want to talk about this because it actually is in alliance, it's aligned with the Bible. It's very important to understand it because there's also prophecies that are fulfilled by them. For example, the Assyrians. There's a prophecy that Jonah, few people know this, a lot of people know about the book of Jonah, but do you know that Jonah actually was written in the book of the Kings? Jonah was actually mentioned in the book of the Kings. I believe that's going to be, let me just take a second look, 2 Kings 14 and 25. It talks about Jonah. If you notice, it's the same Jonah from the same father for the sake of it, and he prophesies how Assyria is going to fall. Really interesting because Assyria falls by a people that few people know about called the Scythians. I want to show you that today in a review and going over these things. So fair use. We're going to go over this in a review and talk about this thing. But I want to make sure this thing works before we proceed in it.
The story of a warlike nomad, born with a bow in his hand and raised in the saddle, is a tale nearly as old as civilization itself. Throughout the centuries, the Xiongnu, Huns, Turks, and the Mongols all seared themselves into the memory of these sedentary peoples of their day.
All right, shalom, shalom, family. My bad. I meant to click and turn this thing on real fast. But I want to show you something real fast. I want to show you a little history of. Let me go up real fast. Just go to a little map here. Actually, I think I passed it. All right. I'll just go right here. Okay. So if you never heard of this is actually a little continuation off of what we had touched on the day before. I just want to give you a little history. I'm really excited to go over this history because this history is actually in sequence with the Bible. Now, if you know a little bit about the Aryan race that they came up, the theory where the Nazis came up this idea of the Aryan race, where we actually know that the Germans and Hitler, they're the same people as Ashkenazi, but when they came up with the theory of the Aryan race, it was a group that came from this area, and they end up basically merging this area. And I want to just show you a real quick spread of them. I'm just going to show you this while I talk about it real fast. This just talks about the spread and the growth of them, and we're going to talk about a certain group called the Scythians. And it's very important to know that because they're actually linked, and it's going to bring a connection that a lot of people who study history do not know about. A lot of people actually didn't really know about this, but the video that I'm going to show you that we're going to review is a great video. Not this one, but it's another one that actually gets into depth of the Scythian people and where they came from. So this is actually the true word definition for what the Nazis called the how you say that, the Aryan race, and that actually was later changed to an Indo-European people. At first, they wanted to call it the Japhetic races. They came with different names, like they was thinking Japhetic races, the races of Japheth, or they was thinking Aryan, which actually just talks about a certain area where you can see right here, area, actually called area. This right here, you can see Anatolia. All these groups would be of the group of the Indo-European. Now that we got more science and more information to know who these people are, they actually can tell more easier who these people actually are. I'm just checking the live, making sure everything's working. All right, looks like it's fine. Okay, so what you're seeing here is what is called the Indo-European people, or what you'll say, what people know in the Bible as the Lions of Japheth, for the sake of understanding. Now, Japheth, when Moses landed here on Mount Ararat, around this area, Japheth split and went up here. He went actually some places over here as well. This is kind of like a summary of the idea of the Indo-European lines. Obviously, this is still very further back, very far back. It's going to work its way. Once we get to about 1,000 and such, that's when we're going to get to the biblical ages, when things are going to start being very, very important. So still 2,000, still very, very ancient times. These are going to be the best way to explain it is European. These are European people. They're going to be of the line of Japheth that spread out the continent, for the sake of understanding. They spread up in the north. Very important to understand. We're going to see that talked about in a prophecy. There's a prophecy that talks about these people that come down and attack Assyria. That's why the warning of Jonah, he warned Assyria, Assyria, where Nevada was, and he warned them that they had to repent and turn. This was during the time when the Assyrians reigned over Nevada. I wonder if I'm pronouncing that right, Nevada. And remember, Neviah was later taken by Babylon, but the time when it was prophesied was during the time of the king Jeroboam, not Jeroboam, the first Jeroboam of the king of after Solomon, after the split with Solomon. That you see right there, they just came in, the Scythians. So that's what we're gonna see is these people right here. And now it's important to understand that the Jeroboam that I'm talking about is a later Jeroboam. If you look at the line of Israel, you'll see. Actually, let me go to that. Let's go to that real fast. Was oh, all right. You go to a one of these. There's a little more right here. This is better. All right, so not this Jeroboam. This is the first Jeroboam, but later on, King of Israel, Jeroboam the second, right here. So this Jeroboam, this is almost the time when Israel's gonna fall. So right before they fall, and then you're going to see that Assyria is going to be prophesied of being attacked by a people up north, a people up norther than Assyria. So it's important to understand, where is Assyria. Assyria was right over here, somewhere around this area, and then they end up taking around these areas. They end up taking Israel, the northern tribes, and then it was prophesied that a people up north, even northern of Assyria, was going to come down and destroy them. And we know in history who those people are, the Scythians. So that you're seeing right here, they're kind of expanding and growing. You can see Armenia. These are all one people. These are actually all one people. The Germanics, you see the Kamari. This is something I also noted. You can see I had noted a bunch of these names were actually connected. The Kamari, the Scythians, very interesting stuff. Go back. You can see now they're getting down to this area. Note the year. Then note the area right here. So you see where they're reaching at. I'm gonna go here. This is a study. Remember, this is you can look this up yourself. This is easy enough for even kids to understand. Actually, this is a kid friendly site. I'm gonna click it right here. This just talks about the Aryan race. You can see Aryan race facts for kiddos. You can see it just talks about who are they, what the Nazis thought. Right here, the ideology of Nazism was based upon the idea of the Aryan race or Germanic people being a master race. Guess what race that really was? That's just the Japhetic races. That's what actually they wanted to say was the better races. And they actually came to the theory, which is not just a theory but a fact. Their theory was that when they did a DNA test on a lot of the people, they believed the people who were called Jews, the Ashkenazi, and the modern Arabs, they actually said that they were actually part of the same race as the so-called master race, which is true. They're actually the same people. They're all the same people. When you look at the genetics and everything, Hitler is the same persons as all of them. They're all the same people, for the sake of understanding. It's not a theory anymore, but the name Aryan was changed. It's actually changed to Indo-European. So you see this area right here, let's go back right here. So that's like right about here. So you can see they're kind of stretching out. Still, this is now 112 is going to be where Israel's going to leave the wilderness. So it's still very early. Still very early. They haven't left the wilderness yet. So it's very, very early still. So if you have any questions, let me know, because we're going to go into this history. And this is biblical history. What this is actually biblical history that few people actually know about. Few people actually know about this history. But we're going to go into it. You see ancient Greece there, ancient Greeks, they're all related. So the Greeks, the Scythians, they're Indo-European, Germanic tribes. You can see Celtics, Iranian, they're all the same. India and stuff like that, they are actually the same. They're going to be the same people. All these are going to be the same people. Very important to understand. Now, Israel's coming out of the wilderness. Israel's going to be coming out of the wilderness, making his way. They just left Egypt. Egypt. They just made their way, and now they're the kings. Now's the time of the reign of the kings. Let's look at the year of the reign of the kings. So you can see 900s, right? We're getting there. Remember, BC works its way down, and then AD works its way up. So you can see 900, 800, 700. Let's go back. So right here, the kings are over here. And notice the movements that's being made here. The Scythians are still here. They're one of the major, massive tribes that's ruling over here. They're actually split in pieces. They're actually different pieces that's actually ruling in the midst of them. But they're going to be making their way here. They actually make their way here, and they pretty much sack Assyria. We're going to see that in the history to go a little more detailed in history on these things. Babylonian Conquest, the Babylonians came in, the Persians, old Persia, they end up mingling and mixing with the Persians. So you can see here's that kind of like an end of it right here. So they don't go all the way too far in the future, but I want to show you a little history further in the future. This is very exciting because this actually was something I was waiting for, a video like this, because I'd never seen a video where they would do the history with the maps and everything. So I want to review this and I want to talk about this because this history actually closes a gap. And we'll talk about that afterwards. First, I want to show you this and we'll talk about it while it plays. Really interesting history here. Let me mute real fast.
In this video, we will talk about the ones who came before, the Scythians, the original horse lords of the ancient world. Join us now as we tell the history of perhaps the greatest warriors of antiquity, exploring the legacy they left behind from Greece to China. Shout out to Keeps for sponsoring this video. Statistically, 2 out of 3 guys will experience some kind of hair loss or male pattern baldness by the time they're 35. Description: to the north, and by desert's steppe, is a long and narrow corridor stretching from the Danube River in the west to the Mongolian heartland in the east, sandwiched by the haunting birch forests of Siberia.
So real fast before it starts, it's important to know this is further back, just like how I showed you on that one real fast. I don't know why I closed that. Let me actually open it back. On this real fast summary right here, you can see here is about the years 300s and stuff right here. Now it's important, this one mostly talks about this area. There's actually a space where there's actually an area where things are happening. So right here, this is eastward, this is westward. The reason why that one show westward, because these ones are more active in the scriptures. These ones are more strong people that keeps these people this way, that just keeps that separation between these two. And this is going to be also, you're going to see the Scythians, they basically got 2 branches, actually a few branches, but this is going to be another group and this can be another one.
To the north,
but let's continue.
And by deserts, mountains, and inland seas to the south. It's a resource-scarce region, an endless sea of grass. For much of prehistory, it was nearly impossible for humans to thrive here. But around 3500 BC, everything changed. Beginning in 2 epicenters in modern-day Butai, Kazakhstan, and Derevka, Ukraine, humanity started domesticating wild horses. And suddenly, the vast, unending grasslands of the steppe were no longer an impassable ocean, but an endless horizon. Now able to travel freely between fresh pastures, the peoples of the steppe were able to sustain much larger herds of goats, sheep, and cattle. Thus, the lifestyle of nomadic pastoralism was born, and the people who practiced it thrived. How the Scythians emerged as a distinct culture from other nomads is shrouded in mystery. An unlikely union between Heracles.
So real fast, I'm just skipping the reason why I'm skipping ahead is because it just goes over little history, little things of them and whatnot. So I'm just skipping a little ahead.
And a serpent woman. Historically speaking, the Scythians probably traced their origins to the Andronovo culture, which thrived throughout much of the steppe from about 2000 BC.
Okay, so notice how fast we're moving. He's going right now to 2000 BC. So we just move up a little bit. So about this time, so you can see a little bit of the change of everything. And this is going to be very important. They're also still that Indo-European. What he's actually showing is the history going further back than even what most people were actually noticing. It's very important to understand that they're all going to be the same people. And you're going to see that this group is going to later turn into the famous and known Scythians. So we're going to see that as we proceed.
Around the turn of the first millennium BC, the Scythians lived somewhere east of the Altai Mountains, where they quickly established themselves as the greatest warriors of Inner Eurasia. Beginning in roughly 900 BC, they migrated west into the Ponto-Caspian region and its surrounding environs, where they conquered and displaced the nomadic Cimmerians. By the 6th century BC, the Scythians proper had established themselves in the western edge of the steppe, while tribes like the Massagetes and Sakas, to whom the Scythians were very closely related in language and culture, enjoyed domination in the central and eastern steppe. Collectively,
now note Assyria's right here. Note Assyria's right here. Very important to keep an eye on Assyria. Israel's there. Remember I told you Israel is growing? Israel is growing right now. It's the northern tribe here. You can see the Phoenicians right here. Remember the Phoenicians are going to be a people up north, as well as the Philistines. They're also going to be a Indo-European people. So Israel is going to be a people that came from the south as they were in these areas, and they worked their way and they made their way south, dwelled in Egypt a little bit, mingled with them, with the Hamites, and then they became similar in look and style with them. Then they came up and they end up being in these areas. And they was constantly going at it with the Philistines and these different people. They was always constantly separated. And then the Assyrians, we're going to see they're going to come down and they're going to take Israel in a little bit. So let's continue.
They formed a sphere of cultural domination that extended over a massive territory from Eastern Europe to the fringes of the Chinese world. We have to remember that the Scythians were never a single monolithic people, but rather a broad cultural group with regional.
Now, this part is important to understand. A lot of people, when they think of race, they think of a perfect blend. This is actually one of those cultures. Think about America, right? This is one of those cultures that's designed like America. They're just a mingled people. That's what they basically are. They're just a mingled people, and constantly throughout history, they'll constantly be absorbed in different populations, such as the Turkish tribes and everything. And you're going to see that it's very important to know that these are actually a mixed people. Red hair, you can see different looks in them. Let's proceed. But Indo-European.
Regional differences. Broadly speaking, the average Scythian was pale-skinned. According to both Greek and Chinese sources, light eyes and red hair were common among them as well. While they did dress practically for the cold, windy steppe they lived in, Scythian clothing was not primitive at all, but highly decorative, dyed in bright colors and embroidered with complex patterns. Men dressed in thick sheepskin coats, insulated with wool and held at the waist by sturdy belts decorated with fastening of gold, bronze, bone or wood, and wore trousers well adapted for constant horse riding. Women dressed much like the men did. After all, the cold steppe was no kinder to them than to their husbands. Both men and women wore fancy headgear. Most common were these felted wool caps and these gnome-looking pointy hat things. Deeply spiritual people, the horse lords were highly skilled craftsmen, working with leather, bone, bronze, silver, wood and iron, and most valuable of all, gold. Most Scythian artifacts fall under a distinctive genre known as animal style, so called because it chiefly depicted wild animals, like stags, wildcats, birds, horses, bears, wolves, as well as mythical creatures like griffins. This naturalistic art style was applied to crowns, belts, headsets, hairpins, earrings, combs, mirrors, belt fasteners, among other things. These luxuries were mainly status symbols for the elites of Scythian society. Tattoos were common among both men and women, who used soot and bone needles to inject dark language family, which made them distinctly related to the tongue of the ancient Persians.
I'm going to skip this first part because this part is just going to talk a little bit about their language, the study of linguistics and everything. We actually have a separate video on the study of the language, which is really, really interesting to see. Let me go down a little bit. If you've never seen the linguistic study on this, it gets really deep. Let me go down. We're gonna go when we talk about this, because I want to talk about this, the history behind this, because I think it's important that people know this history, because this stuff isn't taught in schools, and a lot of stuff is very important because they leave out a lot of the information in the Bible. They leave out a lot of stuff in the Bible. But I want to show you two things. Seems upset. Let me see. Go down a little bit. Right here. Let me see if this is it. Very interesting study on linguistics, because, like I said, it links the people of them, and you can see right here. This just talks about the mixing and everything, and how they mixed and everything. This one I'll just keep here. This one's okay too, but this is not what I'm looking for. Actually, it's right here. This is the study of linguistics. So you can see this is that top map right here. Zoom out. So you can see this is where the Scythians are actually going to be up here in the north. Very important to know that they're going to be up here, and they're going to be, all these people are going to be related. And the way we also know they're related is the study of linguistics. The study of linguistics, the study of language, and that their languages are so similar is because they're going to be constantly interacting with each other. Though they're separated from each other. They're separated from each other. Here's another one. Let me go right here. They're separated from, when I say each other, other people, like the tribes, because they're going to be having different writing styles and different things like that. Here's the same. You can see this the same as here. So these are the same people you can see right there for the sake of understanding. But this one's really interesting because this one just goes into, I was talking about this earlier, and I was talking about how the barbarians, the Ashkenaz, the barbarians, the Scythians, the Philistines, they're all the same people. All of them are the same people for the sake of understanding. And it is important to know that, because if you don't, you're going to try to isolate them to one person and not understand what's actually been going on here. But let me go to a certain part here. Very interesting linguistic study right here.
For at least a millennium or two. However, their true origins are a little more complex than the chronicler suggests, and the key to understanding it lies in linguistics. The Germanic languages are part of the Indo-European linguistic family, and therefore share a common ancestor with almost all of the languages of Europe, Northern India, and Western Asia.
So you heard what it just said. It basically let us know that they have a common ancestor. Let me go to a map here and show you something really interesting. I think you should know. I want to show you a really ancient map of the landscape and how they knew these things before we knew them. This is a map from 1840. What is it? 1840 or 1874? 1874 right here. I'm gonna show you this map from 1874. And notice something very important here. Notice this line here. This actually is very important to understand. There's a natural border line. It starts to change right here, and then it changes even more here, and then there's a mountain barrier. It's almost like three lines that has a natural barrier that pretty much, and then there's a desert here. So there's a desert here, there's mountains here, and then there's bigger mountains here, and then it keeps these ones kind of separate from basically mingling with all the ones down here. But I want to show you something, because all this happened very, very early when we look at these things. I'm going to zoom in on this map. Okay. I want to show you something. This map is really interesting because it has biblical names here. And these biblical names, I want you to pay attention to. Up in the north, you're going to have the Lions of Japheth, right? You're going to have Gomer. You're going to have Ashkenaz, right? You're going to have Togarmah, Meshach, and Tubal. If you look very carefully, you can see Magog. You can see Gomer in different places as well. You can see right here, how you said it, Raphath, or that's basically another line of Japheth for the sake of understanding. Very important. And you can see them all up here. You can see the Scythians will be up here. This is actually right here behind here. Let me go over here to one without the details. So you can see right here, this is a very, very old map. Very, very old map. Zoom out a little more, a little too zoomed in there. Zoom in a little more if I could. Okay. Misbehaving on me. All right. Let's go down right here so you can see this map actually divides the sons of Noah. See, you see Ham. Ham is going to be in Africa, lower Africa over here. Shem is going to be right in the middle. Shem is going to be where the blue lines is, right in the middle, right over here. So you can see him kind of mingling with Shem. So you see what's going on there. It's also important to know right here, Kittim and everything, that's Rome. Kittim is also, you can also get Javan. Javan is the Greeks. So Javan right here, this would be a Javan area. This is going to be where the Greeks are. Very important to understand. So they're Greeks. Go to a map just to show you that. This is the area that we're talking about here. This is where the Greeks are. You can see Greece right over there. Rome would also be in this area. And it's also important to remember in this area, right around this area, there was a people that came down from this area. They were the Philistines. They were actually of Japheth. Japheth, the Philistines actually came down and settled right here. Let's go back to this map. All right, so let's look. Let's go down a little bit. So here's where you can see Put and everything. This would be Ham, the Hamites and everything. This would be where the Hamites would be. We know this because Africa. You know, you think Africa, you think Hamites, right? And then you right here, you think right here. This area is going to be very important. This is going to be where the Shemites are. A lot of Shemites, a lot of them actually up here in this area. It's going to be settling up here for the sake of understanding. I'm gonna go down. So Eber is you're gonna have different Shemites here. Eber and the Shemites with his descendants, the Hebrew Ishmaelites and the Edomites. See what's going on there? So you're gonna have them all over here. You're gonna have the Ishmaelites, Edomites, and everything. This is 18. This is noted. Go down real fast. See if that year is on this one. It says extent of the ancient Assyria. Let me go up real fast. Let me see if that's on this one. This one doesn't name how old it is, but you can once you if you ever get a chance to look this up, this is 18. This is the 1800s. They actually knew this in the 1800s for the sake of understanding. But let's go up. Let me go up real fast. The reason why I want to show you this is because this line here, this natural border line, you're going to have different people up there. And we know this 100% by linguistics and by genetic studies. We know this 100%. You can see the Caucasus Mountain. That's where the name Caucasian comes from. So when you say Caucasian, it's because of the Caucasian Mountains, because usually up there is more people with lighter skin tone, because of the colder climate and everything with those things. So we're going to look at this. It's very, very interesting. So this is biblical. What I'm showing you today is actually biblical information. If not understood, it may not seem like it, but it is. It is actually deep biblical information. I'll see a little more on the linguistic study right here.
As of now, the leading idea is the Kurgan hypothesis, which postulates that the Proto-Indo-European language was spoken by a nomadic Europid people who inhabited the Pontic steppe from at least the 6th millennium BC. Known titularly as the Kurgan people, or alternatively
All right, that's the last of that. I'm going to show you now. We're going to continue with this. This I think we already talked about. This one is just how they mixed and everything. We don't talk about this right now. But this just talks about how they mingled and how they mixed and everything. But let's get back to that video real fast. So you can see all these things are connected, right? You can see on the maps, you can see in the scriptures, it's all aligning. All of it is aligning. Let's go back.
More humorously to our modern sensibilities is the Scythian usage of a certain psychoactive leaf. Indeed, marijuana was regularly enjoyed by the nomads, who mainly used it in rituals, where it was burned in pits and cauldrons so everyone could get intoxicated from the vapors. Due to a lack of reliable sources, the social structure of the Scythians is something of a mystery to us. They may have followed the trifunctional hypothesis, which implies a tiered society. Politically, the Scythians were divided into several large tribal confederations. It appears that at times, certain tribes would rise up and establish domination over all the others. Herodotus wrote that during his time, the most powerful of Scythian tribes were the Paraletae, known also as the Royal Scythians, and they looked upon all the other tribes in the light of slaves. One thing seems certain: kings and chieftains amongst the Scythians held immense power. This is evident by some of the only permanent structures the Scythians left behind, massive burial mounds, in which their highest royalty were interred, alongside all their earthly riches, slaves, and finest horses, a monument to the magnitude of their legacy. Indeed, it is because of these massive tombs that most surviving Scythian artifacts were preserved into the modern day. As we have touched on, war was one of the core pillars of Scythian culture, and the Lords of the Steppe were always ready for battle. Scythian tactics revolved around the ability to maneuver easily around the heavy cavalry and cumbersome infantry of the armies of the civilized world. The Scythians were the first culture in world history to perfect the mounted archer unit, which would be the backbone of so many future nomadic armies. The principal weapon of the Scythian was the composite bow, made from wood, horn, and sinew. The accuracy.
That's actually why they're called Scythians, because of the fact that they use bows on horseback. Let me show you something real fast. Not here. Let me go back to a map here. Okay. Let me show you something real fast on another note. Go up. Just a little history, little details of Scythians and everything.
Constant wars and armed conflicts forced many ancient peoples to build great walls to protect prisoners.
All right, I'm gonna.
And reported that the Scythians came from the north around 700 BC, when they waged war against the Cimmerians, who inhabited the northern Caucasus region. After defeating the Cimmerians and driving them out of the region, the Scythians settled north of the Black Sea, near the borders of the Median Empire. The Scythians did not build villages or cities. Being nomads, they lived in tents and made large camps on the steppes. Their main source of food was their herds of goats, sheep, and horses. These animals provided milk, meat, bones, and hides to survive the hard resources of the land were exhausted. Then it was time to move to a new area, and this cycle repeated every year. The same way of life can be observed among other peoples who lived long after the Scythians, for example, the Huns and the Mongols. The Scythians were expert horsemen and archers, and had a reputation for being savage and sadistic on the battlefield. They showed no mercy to their enemies, and rarely took prisoners, preferring to torture and execute captured enemies. The Scythians wore colorful and elaborate clothing, and pointed hats made of leather or wool. In battle, they wore a style of cuirass that was innovative for the time, made of hardened leather, and covered with small constant.
For the sake of information, we're going to go over that whole video, but not now. We'll look at it just to get a little information on that. If you want to know a little more history background on the history of the Bible, this right here is going to close a major gap, which I'm going to show you in the end how it closes that gap. This is very important to know because these are the same people that took down Assyria, and they merged with the Assyrians. They became one people with them. And it's also known in their genetics. It's very important with these things, but let's keep going.
Of these marksmen was deadly. A horse lord born into the warrior caste would have been trained to shoot from the moment they could walk, and their bow would have been like an extension of the arm. The Scythians were not a one-trick step pony though, and they were also formidable opponents at closer range. They wielded short swords, known as akimekis, as well as daggers and battle axes. They were deadly with the throwing javelin, and employed the use of heavy iron spears as a sort of proto-couch lance to crash through lines of heavy infantry. It should be noted that not all Scythians fought on horseback. Some components of their armies were probably footmen, but the lion's share were certainly saddled up. Throughout much of the first millennium BC, the Scythians and their sister tribes would fight with, conquer, or otherwise influence mind-bogglingly vast territory, and enter the historical records of a diverse array of ancient cultures. The first wave of campaigns undertaken by Scythians proper began in the early 7th century BC.
Okay, so what year is this? Early 7th century BC. This is the prophecy that's coming to pass that was prophesied that Assyria was going to be hit. Now, read the book. If you ever read the book of Jonah, notice that it's warning them that they're going to be destroyed. The time that Jonah is actually preaching, it's going to be right here at the time of Jeroboam, 7th century. So he's preaching right here. And then right a little bit later on, that's when we see the people come down and hit Assyria. You can, if you ever look at some prophecies, very interesting prophecies of Neviah. I'm gonna show you a interesting one of Neviah that talks about a people coming to them from the north. Which, if you look at where Neviah is in the north. Neviah is already in the north. I want to read you out loud Zechariah 2 and 12. Oh no, 13. I'm gonna read you Zechariah 2 and 13. Listen to this. He will stretch out his hand against the north and destroy Assyria, and will make Neviah a desolation and a dry wilderness. Now, notice that he says he will stretch out his hand against the north. Now, why is that important? Because what he's actually saying here is that he's going to stretch out his hand against the north, but the people that's actually going to hit them is the people in the north. A people of the north area is going to come down and hit Assyria. That's what he's saying, that he's going to stretch out his hand against the north, and they're going to basically come down and they're going to sack Assyria. And that's what you're going to see right here in history mentioning that event. Let's see that.
When they burst onto the scene and engaged in a century
Before that happens, they go all the way to Egypt. Egypt basically pays them and say, don't kill us, don't destroy us, because they see how big their army is and everything. And then they later on making an alliance with the Babylonians and the Medes. And then they sack Assyria because Assyria was strong in that area. But then they turn on them. The Medes and the Babylonians, they end up turning on them and they push them back up. But you're going to see that here.
centuries worth of warfare upon the civilizations of the Caucasus and the Middle East. First, they devastated the ancient kingdoms of Urartu and Assyria. Following up on this momentum, King Magog pushed further south, launching an expedition into Egypt. Cowed by the massive horde at his doorstep, Pharaoh Psamtik I bequeathed the Scythian king with lavish gifts in order to spare his kingdom. In 612 BC, the Scythians allied with their Iranian cousins, the Medes, sacking and destroying the Assyrian capital Nineveh, toppling the Assyrian Empire in the process. This alliance soon fell apart.
Nineveh. So Nineveh was hit hard. So you see that? That's important for records of the biblical history. Assyria, look at the year here, about a little earlier than this, about 700. It's important to understand that's how Assyria fell. The Babylonians merged with the Medes and these people of the north, and they sacked Navida, for the sake of understanding, or Navida. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that weird. Navida, or Navidia. I don't know why I keep pronouncing that word weird. But you can see this is actually how they came down. They sacked them. And then these ones work together a little bit, and then you're going to push them up. Notice the Medes, they're going to later on merge with the Persians. They're going to later on become with the Persians. But notice the next power that's going to reign is Babylon. So Babylon is going to reign, and then comes the Medes and the Persians. So Assyria, taken down right then and there.
Part upon
Let's mute this real fast.
Their victory, with the Medes turning on the Scythians, forcing them back into their Pontic Iranian cousins, the Medes, sacking and destroying the Assyrian capital Nineveh, toppling the Assyrian Empire in the process. This alliance soon fell apart upon their victory, with the Medes turning on the Scythians, forcing them back into their Pontic homeland. Thus began a centuries-long rivalry between the nomadic Iranians and their sedentary Iranian relatives, a trend that would continue when the Persian Achaemenid Empire was founded in 550 BC. Known best for their...
Now, it's important to understand this jumped a little bit, but let me tell you what happened in between. So right here, if you notice, I'm just going to turn this down real fast. Notice that they come down, we get the Babylonians, we get the Medes. Now, this is before Babylon grows in power. You can see Babylon actually gets power about close to 599 BC. That's when they actually start to grow, mainly after they fight with the Egypt at the Battle of Carchemish. And that's actually important to understand that that's when they start to really take these areas. But right here in this little miniature battle here, you're going to see the Babylonians, they're going to lose to the Medes. But then they're going to rise back up. Nebuchadnezzar is going to become a captain. You can see right here, Babylon, he's going to become a captain and he's going to grow. He's going to take this area. He's going to take all these areas. He's going to take all these areas. So you can see they came down. And this is all historical. This is in the Bible. This is historical. So you see the Assyrians, they lost against all of them. So you can see the Assyrians lost against the Medes and the Babylonians. And then the Babylonians returned back. And then the Medes pushed them. So they pushed them out. You can see right there. And then there later on, these are going to go at it. Babylon's going to reign. And then later on, Persia reigns. So let's continue.
That would continue when the Persian Achaemenid Empire was founded in 550 BC. Known best for their immortal struggle with the Greek city.
Ensure to understand that this is Persia. Right here, this is Persia. You can see they merged with the Medes. They took Babylon. They took the area of Assyria, and they got all these areas. So you can see this is going to be the Persians. And something, that's going to be an epic battle that's going to happen here. Cyrus, the same Cyrus that you see in the book of Ezra, that had built, and you see him also in the book, the last part of Daniel, right after the 7-year captivity that they went through when they got exiled from Jerusalem. And then you get Cyrus comes in. Interesting to note, Cyrus dies by a woman. So let's continue.
States. This quintessential Persian Empire had a complex relationship with the nomads to their north. Many Scythians served as mercenaries and vassals to the Persians, but many more refused to submit their quota of earth and water to the King of Kings, defying the empire's attempts to subjugate them. Perhaps the greatest of Achaemenid kings, Cyrus the Great, conquered the wealthy Lydians, the mighty Medians, and ancient Babylonians. But when he turned his ambitions northwards, he would finally meet his match. In a campaign into what is now southern Kazakhstan in 530 BC, Cyrus came to blows with the culturally Scythian Massagetae tribe, led by a firebrand warrior queen, Tomyris. Tomyris was able to defeat Cyrus in a clash that Herodotus called the fiercest battle fought between non-Greeks ever seen. There, the Persian king was slain, and his head claimed by the victorious queen. Cyrus's successor, Darius I, would once again try to subjugate the Horse Lords in 513 BC.
So that's really crazy. If you know, you can see Cyrus was slain by a woman, and now you see Darius. Now during the time of Israel, Darius was the one during his time. The people pretty much fooled Darius and said, these are really bad people. Don't let them build the temple. So they didn't get the chance to build the temple because they end up convincing Darius not to build it. So they stopped. They were building the temple during a little bit, and then they stopped building the temple during the reign of Darius, the second temple.
This time focusing on the tribes north of the Black Sea. According to Herodotus' account of this campaign, the Scythians did what they did best, refusing to engage in pitched battles, while using their light cavalry to constantly harass the cumbersome Persian force, drawing them deep into Scythian territory, all the while burning pastures, smashing wells, and raiding Persian supply wagons. Eventually, Darius was forced to retreat. At the end of this campaign, the Scythians had lost a good chunk of their best pasture land to their scorched earth policy. Nevertheless, the nomads retained their independence, and in the decades that followed, they would slowly recover. As one might have guessed from Herodotus' constant appearance in this video, the Scythians have an extensive history with the ancient Greeks, with the two words.
All right, so now this is where you want to pay attention. So this is where we actually notice how large they are. Now they're reaching over to the Greeks. This is where the Greeks are. And now they're going to start interacting with the Greeks. Note the year. The Greeks, Alexander is about to come in. In fact, they're going to go at it with Alexander the Great's dead. So they're going to go at it, and you can see how they're constantly playing a part in history. Throughout all of history, they're playing a big part.
worlds mainly intersecting along the northern coast of the Black Sea. The Greeks had colonies in this region since the 7th century BC, but it was in the 4th century Bosporan kingdom that Greeks and Scythians truly began to live in harmony with one another, thriving as partners in the local fish, grain and slave trades. It was here that a unique style of Greco-Scythian art developed, with Greek artisans crafting ornate gold pieces for Scythian customers, featuring both the old Scythian animal style and Greek humanistic forms as well. This Hellenic influence on Scythian material culture would extend throughout the Ponto-Caspian steppe, affecting not only Scythian art, but their arms and armor too. That is not to say that the Scythians always maintained peaceful relations with the Greeks. On the contrary, some of their most devastating wars were fought against the Hellenic world. In the latter half of the 3rd century BC, a man known to the Greeks as Ateas had become among the most powerful of Scythian kings, ruling a vast confederation of tribes between the Danube and the Don rivers. In 339 BC, he turned his territorial ambitions southwards, past the Thracians and into Macedon. The kingdom was still a generation away from the reign of Alexander, but the Great One's father, Philip II, was a military genius in his own right and more than a match for the Scythians. That same year, Scythian cavalry came head-to-head with the Macedonian phalanx on the plains of modern-day Dobruja. King Philip won a decisive victory. King Ateas was killed in battle and his army was scattered, his tribal confederation shattering into pieces upon his death. This greatly weakened the power of the Scythians in the Pontic steppe. On that note, let us turn away from the west and take a look at the Scythian influence in the east. Like the western tribes, the Scythians on the Asian end of the Altai.
So remember I told you there was 2 parts to them. There's one part here and another part there. That actually makes a major different group. So you can see some of the Scythians are over here in this area. Later on, they're going to become the Turks and everything. You can see right here, there's going to be some other Scythians in these areas where Mongolia is and all these things. They're going to later be pushed, and you're going to see them later merge with the Turks and everything. So it's going to be very interesting to see that. It really closed a gap. That's very important.
Mountains were composed of many diverse tribes, but collectively are referred to as the Saka. Records of their existence are found as far east as the annals of Han Dynasty China. According to the Chinese, the Sakas originally lived between the fertile Ili and Chu river valleys, between present-day Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, but in the early 2nd century BC, they fell victim to a classic phenomenon known as the nomadic migration domino effect. The Xiongnu, predecessors of the Huns, pushed the nomadic Yuezhi people out of their homeland in modern-day Gansu, China. As a result, the Yuezhi were forced on a mass exodus westward, making war on the Sakas and pushing them out of their homeland. Thus, the Sakas in turn were forced to find themselves a new home. To that end, they saddled up and thundered into the fertile hills of Bactria. At the time, this land was the furthest eastern edge of the Hellenic world, a rich urban empire ruled by the Greek descendants of Alexander's army. By 132 BC, the Sakas had subjugated the eastern Hellenes and become the masters of the region. The Sakas did not stop in Bactria, but rode further south through the Hindu Kush and past the ancient Indus River. Indeed, for a time, a branch of the Scythians established domination over much of northwestern India, deposing the Indo-Greek kings who had ruled before. The Scythian presence in India would endure, in some form or another, for over 4 centuries. Following in the footsteps of the Indo-Greeks, the Indo-Scythians quickly adopted Buddhism as their faith, slowly abandoning their nomadic steppe roots to assimilate into the culture of their sedentary Indian subjects. Another place the Saka Scythians had a presence was in the desert kingdoms of Khotan and Shule in the Tarim Basin. It's not entirely clear how the Saka arrived here, but it was probably via their kingdoms in India. It's equally unclear whether the peoples of Khotan and Shule were predominantly ethnic Scythians. However, the common languages of these kingdoms were Eastern Iranian dialects closely related to the Scythian tongue, which suggests that descendants of the steppe nomads were the dominant population in the region. Whatever the case, these kingdoms were heavily Indianized and Buddhist. The arid desert offered little in the way of grazing land, so nomadic pastoralism was not an option. Instead, the population flourished in dense cities built upon oases and rivers. It was a far cry from the grassy plains and rugged nomadic lifestyle in which Scythian culture was born, but it could be argued that some form of Scythian culture, albeit hybridized and evolved, survived in this region. The most notable legacy of these oasis states is their interaction with the Middle Kingdom. As China's Han dynasty expanded westwards under the reign of Emperor Han Wudi, they came into contact with the cities of the Tarim Basin. At various points throughout the 2nd centuries BC to AD, the Indo-Scythians of the Tarim Basin were tribute-paying vassals of Imperial China, who used the region as a buffer zone to prevent being flanked by their greatest enemy, the nomadic Xiongnu. Eventually, like with all peoples and cultures, the Scythian world transitioned from its golden age into its twilight years.
Okay, so note this year. So now we're out of the BC, now we're going to AD. Now this is the time of the Romans. Now the Romans are starting to reign. The Greeks were there, then the Romans started to reign. Remember, Alexander took all the area of the Persians and a bunch of different areas, and then the Romans came and then took those areas and some other areas. Now notice right here, this is going to be that other, remember there's one on the east side. This is the east. This is why it calls the Middle East. This is the middle of the east. This is the east over here. And this is the west. This will be of the west, what they call the west. So over here, there will be another group, but the major group will be right here. They will slowly be replaced with the groups that's over here. So remember, that was a group that was developing over here. Those groups are going to come here and basically merge with these groups for the sake of understanding. Let's keep going and see that.
Over the centuries, different people groups would come and replace them in different chunks of their traditional heartland. In the early centuries AD, the Scythians proper were largely subjugated by their Iranian cousin tribes, the Sarmatians. The Sarmatians continued the legacy of Iranian nomadic pastoralism in the region for a time, before being subsumed by the same wave of Gothic and Hunnic invasions that would eventually take down the Western Roman Empire.
Who are these Gothic and Hunnic invasion right here? This is the Turks. This is where you're going to get the Khazars, the Gog Turks and all those things. Let me just show you that real fast. They're going to break down into different branches and different groups. Let me find that. Actually, it's up here. Should be right here. Right here. Okay, so this is where those are going to be parted. So you can see this is going to be that area. Now, if you note, go back to that. If you note here, these maps all differ. They know that they're up here. They don't know how wide it mainly was. But this is about the size. It's about the size that it is. So you can see here, it's a little smaller, but it actually reaches further over. This is going to be where the Khazars are. We're going to know because during that split. But I want to show you this because this one is also going to have a little bit of that information there. I'm going to show you this real fast of who these are. I'm going to go to 416. Okay. I'll let it play. We don't need the sound. So this is, let me just go back a little bit. So it just talks about, remember how it's just talking about how
for a short time it appeared their glory days would return.
Remember how it's talking about how they were fighting with the Chinese over there? The Chinese are going to end up pushing them out. Obviously know a little bit about the history. I'm not well equipped in the history of the Chinese, the dynasties and all those things until they end up to become China and everything. But I do know that this area was constantly being taken and being taken and being taken. But this group right here basically stayed the same, kind of separate from this more mingled group. Remember, this group is going to be over here. The Scythians are over here. They're another people. This group is over here, and they're going to come here and merge with these ones. That's what's going to happen here. So you can see it's going to go a little bit. 8th century. So you can see this is earlier on. And then we're going to see they'll move over. So you can see this is the groups that came from them. So this is one group that came from them. So here's the Gog Turks right here. You see how they reach all over here. So they go over here. They kind of start. These are going to all start merging. So you can see it's going to talk about how they're going to grow and what came out of them. So here's one group that came out of them. The Khazars. See how they reach all the way over here? The Khazars came out of them. They're going to be the ones that's right in this area right here. So they came out of them. You see right there. Right here is another ones of them. All these are going to be all of the same people. So you can see here, get an idea of the Indo-European groups. The reason why this is important is because if you notice history, you won't be taken for a surprise for what's coming very soon. Very, very soon in our generation, there's going to be a table that's going to turn. The whole world is going to be brought to understanding that seems to have been forgotten. But make sure this okay. So I just want to show you that because this is what they're going to become. This is what they're going to become, the Gog Turks, and this is actually going to be where the quote unquote Khazars come from. And this is what you're going to see. This is the Indo-European grouping. Now let's keep on going because this right here, it's almost finished and just does a little thing at the end. I'll show you that real fast.
The Slavic expansions between the 5th and 10th centuries AD ended the Scythio-Sarmatian presence on the Pontic steppe for good.
So the final wave of them is what they called Slavs, and in the Slavic language, they got a lot of studies of that. You can see yourself in the linguistic studies for some of those things. Really interesting to see some of those things, going in those things. Let's go down to one of those right here. This just talks about the Slavs and everything and how they grew and where they came from. You're going to get different grouping here. I'll see if I have this site here. Here's a little bit here. This just goes into the history of it, the linguistics and everything. Really interesting information with this. I'm not going to go over it right now, maybe another time, but it just talks about the Indo-European controversy and what's going on with that, with the study of language and genetics and all those things. Brings a open door to some information that not a lot of people had at first knew or at first was able to understand for the sake of understanding. Here is a little direct information. I'm probably not going to play this one, but this just goes into the linguistics of it. I'm not going to play this one, but this note is in the description. There's an interesting video at the top of this image here. Goes really interesting on those the people who are called the Slavs and everything, which is actually the Yiddish language. That's where the Yiddish language came from the Slavs. It's very important to understand that. Let's keep going.
Good, and before long, the Iranian nomads had assimilated into the medieval forebears of Russians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians. In India, the Scythians eventually lost their territories to other power players in the region, like the Sassanids, Indo-Parthians, and Guptas. Whatever cultural presence they had in the region was eventually absorbed into the Indian mainstream. Meanwhile, the Scythians of the Tarim Basin and most of Central Asia were largely displaced and assimilated by a wave of early Turkic migration from the 6th century AD onwards, a legacy we still see today as the majority of modern Central Asia is Turkic-speaking. The Scythian world was largely gone by the early Middle Ages. But the Scythian people were not wiped out entirely. The medieval Alans, who established a powerful kingdom in the Caucasus between the 9th and 13th centuries AD,
Note this name here. Why is this important? We just looked at this. This is why I had this open. Let's look at something real fast. Let's go up. I did a quick study, and I showed you that the Ashkenazi are 100% Khazarian because they match with the same people that come from the same grouping. Now, note this name. I want you to see this name, the Alans. Now, we already looked at this. You can see here the Alans, and then later on, while the Alans had came in, right? When they settled there, you seen that the Khazars came there, right here. And we looked at the genetics. These are all the same people. These are the Slavic. Remember, I talked about the Slavic language, the Slavic people. All right, here is what they call the Slavs came from, and you can see right here the Avars. Now, notice that they came from the east, right? They came where the Huns were. They pushed them. Huns pushed them out. The Alvins basically came over here. They're going to settle in these areas. Right here is going to be where the Caucasian mountains is, where where you see the Khazars are going to be. So you can see the Khazars come in as well. The Avars come in. They're coming Avars, and they're gonna settle here, right? Now, this is very important to understand when we look at this thing, because when we actually understand what's going on here, right, this is going to be very important, because when the Turks settle here in these areas, we can actually know that because it's recorded in history, and then we can find out who they are if we follow linguistics and if we follow the study of genetics and all those things. So the Alvins, and then you got the Avars, and then you got the what's called the Slavs, the Turkish people, and the Khazars, right? Go a little bit over. So you can see, just to see that, that's the reason why I wanted to show you this, because this is very interesting, very, very interesting history, very, 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 very interesting history when you see these things right here. So this is a very interesting little thing that I think is important to note, very, very important to note. So let's keep going. So you can see they're going to be settled in these areas.
were believed to be the descendants of Queen Tomyris and the Scythian Massagetae tribe. While their kingdom was wiped out by the Mongol invasion in 1239 AD, they remained in the region into the present day in the form of the modern Ossetian people. Today, the Scythians are a faded memory, a footnote in the history books of Greece, Iran, India, and China. Yet, as army after army of horse-riding, bow-shooting nomadic warlords thundered across the Eurasian steppe over the centuries, whether they acknowledged it or not, building upon the legacy of the Scythians, the first and original horse lords of the ancient world. Our series on ancient.
So that's why I wanted to go over this. We'll watch a real quick 10-minute video, but you see what I was noting is that the Japhethites, the what they call the Aryan Lions, that was actually going to be all these the same. The barbarians, the Philistines, all Khazars, the Turks, these are all the same. They're actually the same. It was very interesting because when I noted this, I noticed how complex it was in history that was almost hard to find if it wasn't noted. If it wasn't noted, it'd be almost impossible to find out who people actually are. So I thought it was very interesting to know this information on these things. It just talks about the Gog Turk. I'm not going to go over the Gog Turks right now. We just seen a little bit on them. I'm not going to go over this, but I'm going to close this. Let me actually show you. This is going to show a quick merging on how they merge and everything. And then I'm going to show you this. So I'm just going to let it play because I don't really need the sound. I understand it very well. So these right here is going to be more of a European stock, more pure European stock. This is going to be more your Asian. This is more your Asian stock. They said basically at one point in time, they came down and they merged with them. They basically became like another people. That's why you see one group over here and another group over here. And then they have a middle group, a mixed, mingled people, more mixed, more mingled, more of a merge, to say. And then that they actually kept on. They kept basically mingling and mixing and everything. And then you're gonna soon see that these ones basically got tired of them. They got tired of these ones and they pushed them. They pushed them out. That's how. If you notice how China is today, that's why China is more like separate, more of a separate style. If you kind of get a look at it, than a lot of the European places, for the sake of understanding, they're more different for the sake of understanding. I'm gonna show you here. This is the Bronze Age. That's more like when Israel was coming out of Egypt and all those times like that. Very important. It's still very early. So it's showing that they was doing this. They was mixing. Japheth came up here. They was mixing different lines of Japheth. Remember, it's important to understand Japheth isn't just, now they're all going to be in the same Y chromosome group. They're going to be same grouping in that sense, but they're going to be different branches. Very important with that one. Let me go back down here, right there. Let me go here and go to, I believe I have a chart on here. Let me see if I do. Very important to understand this chart here. So Japheth, the line of Japheth, you can see there's different branches. So there'll be one major group. So we're all from Noah, right? But there's different stocks. So this one will be more the Indo-European. So you can see different lines they would have, and then they basically mixed. A lot of people will say that the Mongolians would probably be Magog, for the sake of understanding. Just to get an idea on some of these things. Gomer will be more the Ashkenaz, Russians, and things like that. Garma. You're going to also have the separate line of the Greeks, which is from Javan, which is going to be the Greeks and the Romans. Going to be a little different with those ones. And then you got other subgroups, little subgroups going on there. You got some here, and let's go real fast to this. So you can see there's a lot of mixing going on. This is the Iron Age. That was the Iron Age. The Iron Age is about the time of the kings and everything. Later on that time, it just talks about the tools they were using in that time. Here's a little more detailed going into the mixing. You can get a better look at this, to how they would look. So you can see this would be like more your like Iranian style. We know that because they merged with the Assyrians. Very important to understand that. We also know that because in the genetics, it's also proven in their genetics that they merged with the Assyrians. For example, Armenians, which were the Caucasian mountains, they merged with the Assyrians. They know this because they took the Assyrian DNA, and they know that they are actually the same. Let me actually go to that here. Let me actually move these notes more closer to each other so you know where they're at. Let me show you that genetic right here. So here is the Assyrian and Armenian Y chromosome. Basically putting it together, it's basically the same. Basically the same. They know that they basically merged and mixed with each other when they look at that Y chromosome. The Y chromosome is very important. It's one of those very important things to take a look at with those things. So this is a really interesting one where it talks about how they mixed and they mingled, how they all became the same people. I'll let you see that 55 and 20 real quick, interesting information on a study that I think is very important. Let me actually close this.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Armenians who belong to this interesting group, and you can see them in red and they have a very strange distribution, and we need to determine where these people came from. I mentioned earlier that we were very close to the neighboring populations when you look at our overall DNA, but when you plot the Y-DNA of men, for example, this shows you Armenians in red and Assyrians in blue. And when you plot who is A, who is J, who is J2, R1b, you get almost the same distribution, which is mind-blowing and shows you that initially we were the same people who ended up belonging to different religious groups and speaking different languages. You can do that with Armenians and Kurdish Jews. These are Jews who never lived in the Near East, who always stayed in northern Iraq.
Why is this study important? Because they know 100% that the Armenians and the Kurds never came down and merged with the people of the Bible. It's important to understand that. For them to have the same Y chromosome is slim to none. Slim to none. Very important to understand that. I'm going to show you a real quick, I got to think about where I had put that. Real interesting study. Let me see if I can find it. Study on the Kurds. Let's see if I can. Portuguese Jews. Yeah. Let me see. Let me see. Thinking. It's not. It's probably not on this one. I'll look for it. It's really interesting. A really interesting one. If you've never seen it, I might even just be able to just find it real fast on YouTube. Who they know the history. Like if you've never seen the history of the Kurds, they know the Kurds are. See if I can find it. Let's see. I don't know if this is it. Just looking here to see if it's one of these. It's a real short one. That's the only thing that I know. It might be that 3-minute one, but it's really short. Really short. So it might be that one. Might be. Yeah, this one goes over it too. That goes over who they are and whatnot. But here, this one might be it. Don't need the sound. Just gonna look here. Okay. Yeah. Let me see. Just looking here. This one's not it. It's a real interesting one that goes directly into the history, into those things. Maybe I'll go into another time. But it's really interesting. It's really interesting, and that's why they're talking about this. They want to find out what's going on with these ones. So the Kurds, they actually stayed. These ones stayed up here. So the Kurds were up here. The Armenians were up here too. That's why they said that like that. They're basically saying they're studying these people and their Y chromosome and everything. I'm gonna let it play.
Religious groups and speaking different languages. You can do that with Armenians and Kurdish Jews. These are Jews who never lived in the Near East, who always stayed in northern Iraq, in these areas. And here, again, it's the same colors for both. It's not exactly the same, but you see that Kurdish Jews and Armenians also have the same deep roots. So before Armenians became Armenian and before Jews were Jews, they clearly came from the same part of the world. That's why it's not a surprise that they belong to the same groups. Two more slides to talk about what's the next focus of our research. First, now we're able through very.
So that's just the reason why I wanted to show you that mainly was because of that study of the Assyrian line. Basically letting you know that they merged with the Assyrians for the sake of understanding. Let me close this. And getting back to this. So you can see right here, they would have merged with these here, right? The Assyrians and different peoples. They would have became one with the more Japhetic lines, and then they would have became like a mingled people. So you can see, and then they migrated this way, still early, very early. So you can see they migrated. And remember how I showed you that one picture? They became one. They know because they have a lot of those things. They call it a Caucasoid look, which that kind of like that European look right there. And you can see the Scythians and whatnot. They know because of genetic studies, they're able to pull up genetics from ancient peoples, which is very interesting. So you can see you're going to have the people over here, different people. Here's going to become the Turkish people. So they're going to be a mix, more of a mixed people between the European and the more Asian people, for the sake of understanding. These are more of a mixed, mingled middle people. And you can see they're going to be right here. Get an idea of that. And you're going to see different groups that's going to be emerging in these areas. This is why a lot of them, they're going to have the same genetics in a way. Now, this is important. This is one of the most important pieces to know. When the Asian areas, they got tired of them, right? And they pushed them out. These are what they call Turkish people. They pushed them. They pushed them this way. You already had remember, already over here was the Scythian people. They already were talking with the Greeks. The Greeks would be over here in this area, in this oddly shaped map, as you can see here. But it's all right. We can understand it based on it. So you can see here's basically what we're looking at here. So you can see there's Turkey. And then you have Greece over there. So you can have Turkey right here. You're going to have Greece. So you can see right there, Greece would be right there. So you can see that's what you're seeing here. So you're going to have Greece there, Turkey, and then they're going to move over. And this is what you call when the barbarians came in. When the barbarians came in, this is who they were. They were the Turkish people that came in. Then they landed with the Assyrians. They merged with them because they were already the same people. And pretty much that's why the Romans, if you ever look up when did Rome fall, you might see 300 or 400 BC or 80. And that's not when they fell. They were just hit really hard by the Turkish tribes. They were hit really, really hard where it looked like they fell. Where basically what is called the western part of Rome fell, but the eastern part was still standing, which is actually the major area of Rome, which is at Constantinople, where Constantine moved the capital there. But they got hit hard because they came there and they wrapped around. They took Rome. They took this area of Rome, but they didn't take the capital of Rome. It's kind of like the 13 tribes of America. If someone took the 13 tribes right now, they don't take America, even though those are original colonies. So Rome was originally here, but moved here. So they came there and took here, and they end up going all the way over here and being in Portugal and Spain. So they end up controlling these areas and end up even merging with Rome. It's actually proven in history they became one with Rome. One of their families gave their daughter to one of them, the Khazars. The Khazars became a very powerful people. This is who the Ashkenazi are, for the sake of understanding. They had merged with Rome, and they pretty much had a leader on the throne of Rome, for the sake of understanding. So they had a lot of influence on Rome, as well as causing that fall. You can see right there. That's just to get an idea of how they came in and settled in that area. I'll close that. Now, for the last bit, get a little more summary on the Scythians. And this is just important to know. Now you know this history on something that you will never see anywhere else, or even broken down like this, for the sake of understanding. So let's see this.
Wars and armed conflicts forced many ancient peoples to build great wars and armed conflicts forced many ancient peoples to build great walls to protect their cities from outside threats. Some kingdoms put all their trust in the strength of their walls and created true, almost impregnable fortresses. But there were also those who preferred to live freely on the plains, far from the restrictions imposed by the urban lifestyle. The Scythians lived mainly as nomadic horsemen and developed a warrior culture based on the strength of their warriors and tribal leaders. Of Iranian origin, the Scythians inhabited the steppes of a vast region where Ukraine, Russia, Siberia, and Mongolia are located today. The Scythians also inhabited lands near India and China. The Greek historian Herodotus is credited with giving the name Scythians to the steppe people, as well as to the region where they lived, long called Scythia. The name derives from the Greek word skolatoi, which can be translated
It's important to know that these people usually don't really name themselves. People actually name them. Um, the Scythians, they name them because it's areas. For example, the Khazars, they're named Khazars because they land in this area. I forgot exactly how you say it. Basically a Khazaria. They were in an area called Khazaria. That's why they're called Khazars. Right here, so you can see Khazars. The Khazars are just basically Turkish people. The best way to understand it is they're Turkish people. You can see how they came in, the Khazars' losses and wins. How they came in, they settled here. This is where they got a win. They won this area. They were losing in these areas and whatnot. So you can see what's going on there. Go down a little bit. Actually up. I want to show you something else real fast to see if right here. So you can see this area right here. This is where the Khazars were. Because this river valley right here, they named them the Khazars. Now they didn't know when the Turks came, they just called them barbarians. You see the Avars right there? You can see, but we just talked about that. It's important to understand as a Caucasian mountains, the Caucasus Mountains. Very important to understand when the Turks came, they called them the barbarians. In fact, a lot of this history is starting to come out just recently in the last few years. When they starting to find out this stuff with some of the new techniques to find out some information. So now they know who these people are. They're breaking down who these people are. They're not just calling them all barbarians. Before they was just called barbarians, you didn't know exactly what they were. But now they're starting to know exactly who they are. They're knowing who the sea peoples are. They're knowing there's almost no one who's hidden in history. There's nothing hidden that's not being revealed in the time that we're in. So we're starting to find out that these are all the same people genetically and linguistically. And geographically, they're all the same people, even biblically, for the sake of understanding. Ashkenaz, you can look it up yourself, whose that is in the Bible. And then you got to look at Ezekiel 38 and 39, completely prophesies of these groups being one, completely prophesies how they're going to merge with the Ethiopians. Ezekiel 38, 39, really, really deep on those things for the sake of understanding. So this is actually a very, very important thing to know, that they're just, these names come from the areas that they're at. It's not actually something they gave themselves. They're actually Japhetic. These are the Lions of Japheth for the sake of understanding. But understand, for the sake of understanding, for the sake of clarity, obviously this is about bringing forth information of things that are covered up or hidden. We all know that anyone can be saved for the sake of understanding, but it's important to have truth. That's what this is all about. It's about having truth and nothing but the truth. So help us God. So let us lead ourselves in truth and nothing but truth so that we can see these things. So remember, these are all going to be the same people. That's where they get the idea of the Aryan race, which at first, if you ever look it up, look up the Japhetic theory. In fact, I think I have that on here, the summary of basically what they call the Japhetic theory for the sake of understanding. Let me see if I do, or if I don't. Let me see if I do. Just taking a look here. Let's see. Okay. All right, then add it on here, but you can look it up yourself. Otherwise, actually, I'll just, for the sake of the live, just show that, because what they actually was going to call the Indo-European people, quote unquote, they was actually going to call them of the Japhetic. Right here, this is a Japhetic theory. Just to get a little summary of it real fast. You can see it just talks a little bit about that, the Japhetic theory. Later, they settled for the name Indo-European for the sake of understanding. But the Japhetic theory, you can see they would just be, you can see as it increases, it would just be the people up north. That's why they call it, they was going to call it Japhetic theory, because they would be the sons of Japheth. That's why right here, Mar adopted the term Japhetic from Japheth, the name of the son of Noah. So you can see what's going on there for the sake of understanding. So just showing some deeper history on that. It basically talks about those ones are the ones of the Caucasian mountains for the sake of understanding, those upper areas. But let me close this. There's just some interesting information on the Japhetic theory. Let's go back. Okay, so let me close this. Actually, I'll close this, and let's understand This is just the summary of it. Instead of calling it Aryan, they don't call them Aryan anymore. They call them Indo-European, which they actually know the how you say the Philistines are actually Indo-European. They're actually Indo-European for the sake of understanding. But let's see this, because this is going to get deeper into some simple history on them.
As archer or bowman. Since the Scythians were a nomadic people and lived which can be translated as archer, the name Scythians to the steppe people, as well as to the region where they lived, long called Scythia. The name derives from the Greek word skolatoi, which can be translated as archer or bowman. Since the Scythians were a nomadic people and lived divided into many tribes occupying such a large area, the cultural characteristics of the Scythians could vary greatly, and certainly each tribe had its own customs influenced by the region in which it lived. The Assyrians called them Iskuzai, and reported that the Scythians came from the north around 700 BC, when they waged war against the Cimmerians, who inhabited the northern Caucasus region. After defeating the Cimmerians,
so it's important to note that too. I also noted the Cimmerians are actually going to be the same people as them. They actually merged with them. They end up defeating them, merging with them. As it seems that was a common thing that they would do, as you see right here. You can see the Cimmerians, the Scythians, the Cimmerians. I noticed that they were actually merging. They were becoming one people. Very interesting. That's what they were actually doing, a lot of grouping. They would actually absorb them and become one kind of like a merged people. That's why when they converted, it's actually noted that they converted to Judaism in 740 right here. Few people know this, but it's confirmed. You can look it up. It's very cool, interesting information. The Khazars, who they call the Khazars, the Turkish people, who are actually the Ashkenazi, actually converted in 740 AD. They actually converted to Judaism. We know they're the same people because they spoke Yiddish. They spoke Yiddish, and we know who spoke Yiddish. We know the people who spoke Yiddish. It's noted in history that they're the Turkish people. They spoke Yiddish, and it talks about the elements of what they look like and everything like that. That's why sometimes you'll see things talk about dark Jews and light Jews. You probably never heard this before. Did you know in history there was talks of dark Jews and light Jews? Let me just show you something real fast. Dark black Jews, what they call black Jews for the sake of understanding. Let me just show you something very interesting on this. Let me just see where I quoted that right here. Very interesting. In Spain, so you got some of the white Jews, which are more modern. You got the converted Jews, for the sake of understanding. And then you have what is called the black Jews. These are going to be the more, as it says, were original Jewish settlers in Cochin, for the sake of understanding. Now, be careful when trying to study this. If you try to find out who they are, you're going to find different people, but you got to remember, if you never had looked this up yourself or did a study about 1600s and during the 15, 16, 17, 8, even 18, there was a massive cover-up going on. Even earlier, there was massive cover-ups going on when Edom was in Jerusalem. When Edom was in Jerusalem, it is noted and recorded that there were massive cover-ups going on by Edom. And it's not a conspiracy because it was well known and well documented in the cover-up that was going on. For example, you can see, I'm going to show you a quote here. History of the Jews right here by Hannah Adams. She basically talks about how after Edom had destroyed basically the temple, and long story short, he destroyed much of the records. He started to destroy a bunch of records and different things like that right here. He also destroyed the authority of the Grand Sanhedrin and burnt the Jewish records that he might be thought originally Israelite. See what's going on there? Very, very interesting. A lot of conspiracies were going on. A lot of cover-ups were happening at that time. Talk about some other things another time. Very, very interesting, deep information on these things. Very, very interesting, deep information on these things. Let me go up a little bit. So that's why you had different ideas of an Aryan race and all those things that we found out that actually they're the same race. They're actually one. It's not no different, like one race that's higher than the other. You know, we're all from Noah, but we know that there's different ones in Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And then it also allows us to find out if people are telling the truth or not, at who they say they are, for the sake of understanding. So like I had showed you how the Aryans, I showed you the genetics and I showed you they're the same. They get the same genetics and everything. And then I showed you the Khazars, and I showed you their conversion. And now we're going to finish with the Scythians just to get a little more history on them, because when people think about a lot of these tribes, they kind of get a point of view that they kind of make in their own selves. They probably see these tribes as a certain look to their people. But if once you see the history and who they are, the Indo-European style and all that, you'll get a more clear understanding to what's going on in these pictures. So that's why this is. I'm going to show you now. I'm going to let this play.
And driving them out to the region, the Scythians settled north of the Black Sea, near the borders of the Median Empire. The Scythians did not build villages or cities. Being nomads, they lived in tents and made large camps on the steppes. Their main source of food was their herds of goats, sheep, and horses. These animals provided milk, meat, bones, and hides to survive the harsh life on the steppes. The tribe searched for areas where there was a good grazing land for their herds. After 2 or 3 months, the natural resources of the land were exhausted. Then it was time to move to a new area, and this cycle repeated every year. The same way of life can be observed among other peoples who lived long after the Scythians, for example, the Huns and the Mongols. The Scythians were expert horsemen and archers, and had a reputation for being savage and sadistic on the battlefield. They showed no mercy to their enemies, and rarely took prisoners, preferring to torture and execute captured enemies. The Scythians wore colorful and elaborate clothing, and pointed hats made of leather or wool. In battle, they wore a style of cuirass that was innovative for the time, made of hardened leather, and covered with small iron and bronze plates. This type of armor guaranteed good protection, without carrying excessive weight, improving the mobility of the horse and rider. Commanders or richer warriors also equipped their horses with this kind of armor. The bows used by the Scythians were short and light, easy to carry and handle on horseback. Despite their size, these bows were powerful and could shoot at a distance of 500 meters. The Scythians are credited with inventing the saddle and harness for horses, something that would change the history of chivalry around the world. The Scythians also used ropes to tie down enemies on foot or horseback, a great way to immobilize the enemy and keep a safe distance. The Scythians spent so much time mounted on horses that there is a theory that the centaurs of Greek mythology are a representation of the Scythians, half man, half horse. One of the major highlights of Scythian culture was the custom of making beautiful tattoos on their bodies, most of which depicted sacred animals or fighting animals. Mummies found in Siberia still preserve incredibly refined designs with a unique style. The Scythians also painted their faces for battle, as can be seen on death masks. All these features made the Scythians formidable warriors whose fame was known throughout the Iron Age. They fought against the Greeks, Celts, Medians, and Persians, and are credited with the fall of the Median Empire. The Scythians invaded the Median territories by plundering villages and cities, which paved the way for the Persians to rise and form the Achaemenid Empire. But other people shared with the Scythians a reputation for being deadly in the use of bows and horseback. They were known as the Amazon warriors. The Amazons became known through Greek sagas, especially in the 12 Labors of Hercules, where the mythological hero has the task of acquiring a beautiful bejeweled belt that belonged to Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. The Amazons were described by the Greeks as fierce and strong women, able to fight on par with the best male warriors. But the truth is that the Amazons did not belong to the Greek people. Instead, they are associated with the Scythian culture. The origin of the Amazon warriors is uncertain, but it seems that over the centuries they migrated from one region to another and lived for a time in Anatolia, where they joined the Trojans in the fight against the Mycenaean Greeks in the famous Trojan War. Later, they migrated to Scythia and settled in what is now Ukraine. The name Amazon comes from Ha-Mazan, and probably derives from the ancient Babylonian or Persian language. Herodotus called them Androchdones, which means slayers of men. When they arrived in Scythia, the Amazons and Scythians developed a good relationship, as they shared a nomadic culture with many similarities. According to Herodotus, Amazon women agreed to marry Scythian men, but only if they retained the right to be warriors and fight. The Scythians were brutal and numerous warriors, so the Amazons likely pursued an alliance with them, instead of trying.
This is also where, if you just caught that real fast, this is where the first Amazons come from, the female warriors that are known in history. So this is where the Amazons came from and everything. Well, not from them, but they end up merging with them. This is what they do. They merge with a lot of people, a lot of different people.
To take their territories by force, which would certainly have led to a bloodbath. This union gave rise to the Sarmatian clan, a people that would grow strong over time, and whose characteristic was the freedom of its women in society, ruled by queens from the Amazon lineage. During archaeological excavations, skeletons of women were found in Sarmatian tombs. What attracted the attention of researchers was that many were buried with weapons and armor, and some had battle wounds on their bones. The Scythians did not possess any form of writing. Unfortunately, they left no written records about their people. Much of what is known about them comes from archaeological finds and graves. The Scythians buried their kings in artificial burial mounds called kurgans. In many cases, the dead were given to wild animals, in a custom known as celestial burial. The religion practiced by the Scythians remains nameless and little is known about it. Herodotus tells us that the Scythians worshipped a pantheon of 7 gods and goddesses, and that they believed in the spirits of nature, which often came into the world in the form of animals. For the Scythians, the world was divided into the realm of birds, which were part of the subterranean world. They depicted these animals on many gold, including that of prisoners of war, and there is evidence of the custom of cannibalism among the Scythians. To be captured by them meant to be certain of a dreadful death. The Scythians did not build temples, but they left stone sculptures of warriors throughout almost the entire region they inhabited. According to Herodotus, the Scythians used sadistic customs, like using the skull of an enemy as a cup to drink wine and fermented milk. They also used to inflict wounds on themselves when they were mourning to show that they were grieving for the death of a loved one. All these characteristics clearly explain why other peoples, such as the Greeks and Persians, feared the Scythians. From the point of view of people who prided themselves on
These people were later known in history to be Gog and Magog. They feared them because they were cannibals and they were crazy. You know how I just showed you how they were cannibals? See, I got that quote right here. Here's that quote.
Of prisoners of war, and there is evidence of the custom of cannibalism among the Scythians.
So you see how it says it's evident of cannibalism among the Scythians? Let me show you something real fast. What later happened on with the Turks and everything. Really interesting history. Right here, I don't know how you say this name, Arab traveler Ibn Fidlane also reported of his belief writing around 921 AD. He recorded that some hold the opinion that Gog and Magog are the Khazars. See what he said there? Let me show you something right here. Very interesting. A legend was attached to Gog and Magog by the time of the Roman period. Let's talk about that legend. Very interesting to hear this. Show you something. So a little bit on Gog and Magog. If you don't know, Ezekiel 39 and 38, those are the ending. That's talking about our ending. Remember, Gog and Magog is very important for the end times. Very, very, very important. Extremely important. They're going to engulf the world, as you see today. Who engulfs the world today? Let's go down. A legend was attached to Gog and Magog by the time of the Roman Empire that the gates of Alexander were erected by Alexander the Great to repel the tribe, right? Romanized Jewish historian Josephus, now watch what Josephus mentions, knew them as the nation descended from Magog the Japhethite. Well, we know that 100%. We know that 100% by linguistic studies and genetic studies and other information, as in Genesis, and explained them to be the Scythians. See what's going on there? He said Gog and Magog is the Scythians. in the hand of early Christians. I told you at the end of this is gonna bring it all together. At the end of this, we brought it all together. This is where it's gonna be brought together. You can find the information for these things. It's verified. All these things are verified. Very important to understand. Go ahead and read Ezekiel 38 and 39. Now you're going to get a more clear understanding for these things. In the hand of early Christian writers, they became apocalyptic hordes. Throughout the medieval period, variously identified as the Vikings, the Huns, the Khazars, the Mongolians. Remember what we just seen there? These are all types of things that's bringing these together. And guess what else they became? Known as the 10 tribes. Why would at one point they known as the 10 tribes? Not just the 10 tribes. They were actually known as the so-called Jewish people, for the sake of understanding. That's why people say that Gog and Magog in history recorded them as being of Israel. But obviously that history is known, where the Khazars converted. They are actually of Gog and Magog, of the Lions of Japheth, which we already looked at. That's why that Aryan idea was actually going to be called the Japhetic theory, which they knew, for the sake of understanding. Very interesting thing to see these things for the sake of understanding. So that's why I wanted to show you that. I wanted to show you that this here is Gog and Magog. You're actually seeing Gog and Magog. So that's why it has scriptures that say, forsake yourselves, forsake who you are, and seek Christ and his ways and his new way, the new way which is in him, right? Because when we think about all these things and all the things of the past and all those things, understand, it gets really, really deep. It gets really, 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 really deep, really, really deep on these things. So go back. So just to give a good summary there, what I'm showing you here is Gog and Magog. That's why I showed you that map. I'll show you again one more time, going down to that map. Actually, it's not on here. This actually has names. Let me go to those names, back to those names on here. Right there, okay. Let me show you that map here, right here. Let me go down and show you something. Because these have the power, now they have the power over the whole world. They have the power over the whole world. If you never knew about the linking them to the Rothschilds and everything, Ashkenaz. Let me go down and show you something. That 1800s map again. And you can find similar maps to this. It's well known. This is why when you see a lot of designs for Ham, Shem, and Japheth, this is the design, because it was known. So you can see right here, let that come in real fast. Just load it on. All right. So that's why I wanted to show you. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Not that much, just a little bit. I don't think I can. All right. That's all right. We'll just zoom in a lot. Okay. All right. So this is what I wanted to show you. The reason why I wanted to show you this is because it's go up a little bit and you can see Magog up here. You can see Magog, and notice who's this? The Scythians right there. The Scythians, Magog. See what's going on there? Gomer. That's where Gog comes from. Gog is Gomer. Gog is actually Gomer, for the sake of understanding. Magog, Gog, Gomer, Ashkenaz. You see what's going on here? And we actually know that they're going to be in these areas. So you can see what's going on here. Gog Turks, for the sake of understanding. Mount Ararat is where they landed. This is where Shem, Ham, and Japheth split. So Japheth went up. They may even went around this way, but they went up. And then you had Shem, which is going to be over here, and then you're going to have Ham that's going to be down there, for the sake of understanding. Now, this is why I wanted to show you this, because this is some very interesting history. Very, very interesting history. Let's just hear the end of this thing.
To be captured by them meant to be certain of a dreadful death.
I almost forgot to mention, it should be on here, that Alexander the Great kept them out. The reason why Alexander the Great put up a wall is because they were cannibals. He knew they were I don't know if it mentions it here. Let's see if it's mentioned somewhere. Might be somewhere else, but it's really interesting. You can look it up. I want to see if I'm not going to try to find it right now because I got to put down certain things and try to find that. But maybe I'll try once. Alexander built a gate to keep them out. Actually, let me see. Let me see if I can find this with just typing this. I want to show you something very interesting historical information. If I can find it. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting on that. But I'm trying to see if I can find. All right, let me see. I'm gonna type an extra thing down. Oh, no. Okay. Let me try something real fast. Let me see if I can type this down and see if I can find this one document. How do you spell cannibal? I'm just gonna wing it. How do you spell it? Just looking, just trying to see. I'll grab that thing later. Really, it's something that's fairly interesting when it talks about them and everything. Sometimes it called them serpent people. Right here, you can see the people of Satan, different things like that and whatnot. It just talks about that came to the edge of the world, and he met and threatened with Gog and Magog, which is these groups right here, whole wicked people. So right here, so Alexander built a wall to hold out the wicked people. This is kind of it, but I don't know if they're going to talk about that cannibalism with him. I don't know if this is going to talk about. In fact, I probably should have typed cannibalism. Maybe I'll find it more detailed. Last thing I'm gonna search. Cannibal. Doesn't misspell that. Okay. For cannibalism. Let me think about that. Cannibal. I'll just wing it. I think that's how you spell it. Okay. See if it's CC. Just looking with that. That's just one I didn't. All right, so this one kind of goes over it. You can see right there, Alexander blocked from return by his new wall. Gog and Magog are said to engage in human cannibalism. See what's going on there? And remember, we just heard that with the Scythians, right? They were in cannibalism. You can see that time stamp at this video. Scythians, mounted warriors of antiquities, the Amazons, and then this is going to be at 750. At 750, it talks about that. Them being cannibals. I'll show you one more time.
Of prisoners of war, and there was evidence of the custom of cannibalism among the Scythians, to be captured by them.
You heard what it just said there?
Including that of prisoners of war, and there was evidence of the custom of cannibalism among the Scythians, to be captured by.
So you can see that was cannibalism with them. So there's a lot of evidence to this information, to the history of these things, that talks about these things. So it talks about Gog and Magog and their history. Maybe we'll go a little more detail into the direct information on Gog and Magog. I'm very interested on that. There's also a very interesting video. I don't know if I'll be able to find it on YouTube. Close that. So you can see on that right there. This just goes over it right here. It's not hard information to find. Historical information is usually not as hard to find as some may think. It's not as hard to find the historical information to things. Let me actually close this, and I'll see if I can show you this video real fast. That Gog and Magog was known in history. In fact, Gog and Magog was in London. Let me see if I can find it. Let me see location first. Yes. Okay, check this out. Really interesting, very short, not even a minute long. I'm gonna show you something here.
Sculptor David Evans puts the finishing touches to two old friends of Londoners, Gog and Magog. 12 years ago, effigies of the two giants were destroyed when the city's Guildhall was blitzed. But now, exact replicas copied from models are all set to go back to town to take their place. Outside Guildhall, where Gog and Magog have made their home since the reign of Henry V, crowds welcome their return. Weighing 3/4 of a ton each and standing 9'3", they dwarf the onlookers. Although no one's sure why they should live in Guildhall at all, it's certainly like old times to have Gog and Magog in London again.
It's certainly like old times to have Gog and Magog in London again. Think about that. That's not just one name that's biblical, but two names that's biblical and always known to be together. So we see that in Ezekiel 37 and 39. Very deep read. Let's see this ending on this thing.
By them, meant to be certain of a dreadful death. The Scythians did not build temples, but they left stone sculptures of warriors throughout almost the entire region they inhabited. According to Herodotus, the Scythians used sadistic customs, like using the skull of an enemy as a cup to drink wine and fermented milk. They also used to inflict wounds on themselves when they were mourning to show that they were grieving for the death of a loved one. All these characteristics clearly explain why other peoples, such as the Greeks and Persians, feared the Scythians. From the point of view of people who prided themselves on being civilized, the Scythians were bloodthirsty and brutal barbarians. Many Scythian warriors and Amazons served as mercenaries in different nations, working for the most powerful nations of their time. They also traded with many different cultures, which allowed them to develop an artistic style filled with Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and Chinese references. They were particularly skilled in working with gold. The quality and precision of their work were unraveled in the ancient world and would be difficult to replicate today, even with modern tools. Around 300 BC, the Scythians simply disappeared from the face of the earth. This is an event that historians to this day cannot explain. The Scythian culture simply vanished. It is not known.
Now, obviously, this is why I showed you that video, because they didn't vanish. They actually merged with the Turks. They became the Turkish people. So that's one of those things that's very important to know. This people, they didn't vanish. They appeared from Japheth, and they actually end up becoming one with who they already were of. So they became one with the Turkish tribes, for sake of understanding.
For sure if there was a war between the tribes, or factors such as climate change that made survival on the plains difficult. But the fact is that the Scythians dispersed. The Sarmatian clan continued to live in the area and developed, but their culture changed a lot due to the influences of Greek culture. The Scythians are not considered an empire because they did not build cities and were not organized under a single leadership. But if they had, they would have been incredibly powerful. A people that was able to live off the land and strike fear into the most powerful empires of their time came to an end. Despite their mysterious demise, the Scythians left their mark on history.
All right, family. So that is the Scythians. Now, that is going to be very important because it closes a gap. What the gap that it closes is that from the Philistines, and a lot of people didn't know who the Philistines were. Now they know who the Philistines are. They're the same as the Ashkenazi, same genetics, same everything. And then they actually found out that those are actually the Indo-European. And then you found out that the Scythians, they was in that time frame. And then you seen the Turks come in, flooded in, and they covered the people. They became the major group that was there. And then you see that Turk group break into different groups. That's when you get the group that was called the Khazars, a certain group. And those Khazars, they actually end up becoming who is known today as the Ashkenazi, the German tribes, which is word for word quoted because the Germans are the same people. Now, understand, when I say that, that is historical facts. That is genetic facts and historical facts. Here's a historical quote. This one goes all the way further back before America was a country, before America basically became independent. Watch what it says right here. This is in 1706, right? The Antiquities of Nations, more particular, the Celtics and Gauls. Let's go down. Celtic and Gauls. Watch what it says here. It says, we'll go right here. This is interesting because the S's look like F's, but it's not too hard once you understand that. So that it may be said that Asia was the cradle of the human race. So Asia, they actually called up here Asia. So they at that time they called all this Asia. All this was Asia. Remember, Paul went to Asia. This was Asia over here. All these was Asia. They say that these areas were actually the cradle of the human race. That's right. There is no coming out of Africa theory. They thought that people came out of Africa. They thought this is where they came from. This is not where they came from. They actually came from here. When Noah landed in Mount Ararat, and then you get those splits. You get Japheth, you get Shem, and then you get Ham. All right, let's go back. Let's read that. Watch what it says here. So, yes, Asia was the cradle of the human race. We know that because of Fertile Crescent and different things like that. And their original country, it was from thence those swarms came, which filled Germany. So it's basically talking about a group that came from around these areas that was over here and these areas right here. And they said they came over here, and this is actually known. This is why the Aryan idea was that they came from over here and they came over here, which is known. They actually were all in these areas, and they end up settling over here. So this is where Germany came from. He's saying from here before Asia and these different areas in Asia, he's saying that this is where the Germans came from, which is known because of the Scythians and the Gog Turks and whatnot and what have you. And actually, they're the same genetically because it's also confirmed in genetics and in this statement. Watch what it says here. It says, it is from thence those swarms came, which filled Germany and other western and northern countries. Western and northern, so west is the west, and this is the north, right? The northwest. So it's going to be, you can see Spain, Portugal, France, Germany. That's what it's saying here. It's saying that they all came from there. Watch what happens here. Watch what it lets us know here. Let's go back. Watch what it says here. So they filled the western and the northern countries. And here you must know that the Hebrews, at least the modern Jews. Now, why is like that? It's important to know what it's talking about here. It's talking about that there's a difference between the Jews as different Jews, new Jews and old Jews. I talked about that before, where we talked about the black Jews and the white Jews. A lot of them knew that the stuff was going on. It says, believe that the Germans owe their origin to him who in scripture is called Ashkenaz. You see what's going on there? Who was the son of Gomer, and coincidentally, I think that's how you say that, the grandson of Japheth, right? That's why you see those Japhetic lines and everything. And hence it is that when they speak of the Teutons or Germans, right, they call them Alkanazim in their language. Now, I believe Teutons is taking a little bit off of the word of Tugarma, for sake of understanding. I believe so, because Tugarma also became one with the Ashkenaz. Tugarma these became one, and then the Russians became another group. And if you notice, a lot of the Ashkenaz, they was in Russia and they was also in Germany. That's the places where they were, and they're related. They're all related, for sake of understanding. Sons of Gomer. So right here, let us know that they even called them. That's where the word Ashkenazi came from. You know, when you even look at the word Nazi, that's why they called them Nazis. That's where Nazi came from the Ashkenazi. They called them Alkanazim in their language. That's why when you think of Ashkenaz or Ashkenazi, that's why they're called Nazi, for the sake of understanding. Very important to understand that. That's where that comes from. That's where that actually comes from. Very interesting, very, very interesting information there to see. That's what we see. All this is confirmed historically, biblically, linguistically, in the study of language, and genetically, and location. So these things are very important to take in as this is going to bring us to a understanding to what's about to happen. It's about to happen in our generation in a very short time. Remember what I'm telling you here. I'm telling you that very, very soon that you're going to see the whole world be brought to the understanding where it says they have inherited lies. So they're going to understand, as the scripture says, the veil is going to be removed from the earth. The veil is going to be removed from the world. He's going to remove the veil, right? Isaiah 25 and was that 5 or something like that, or 7? Isaiah 25:7, I think. So the veil is going to be removed. The veil is going to be removed from the eyes of the world. So that's what's going to happen. So that's why I wanted to show you this, because when you actually understand what's going on here and the spread of these things, you would actually find out that there have been a conspiracy, right? There's been a conspiracy going on for a long time. It's been a major conspiracy, and the world's not going to tell you the truth. It's not going to tell you the truth, even though they know the truth. They do know, but they're not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you. That's why I want to show you the history, the linguistic study, and the genetic study by putting all these things together, just to show you and to show you that they know this, because they have these conversations among themselves. But that's what we're doing here. We're bringing it all together so you can see it all at once. So very important history. Close these things. If you ever get a chance, just read Ezekiel 40. If you got a chance to see this whole thing from top to bottom, you're going to understand 100% Ezekiel 38 to 39. You'll know it for a fact. It's not a doubt in my mind that you would not know it. You will definitely know those things. So all these are actually going to be very closely related. So you can see right there, Germanic and everything. That's why that saying said that. We know this 100% today. We know this 100%. So that's why I wanted to show you the Scythians, because throughout history, they play a major part in the Bible, and the real truth to who they are is Gog and Magog. So with that, family, be blessed, be beloved, and amen.